Good afternoon and also good morning, everyone, based on where you are. It's almost 3:30 a.m. in Seattle. So my name is Ben. Today I'll be presenting our work, Users' Perception of Search Engine Biases and Satisfaction. First, we work as a team of three. I'm a first-year PhD student in the information science, researching in data science for social good and fairness. Dr. Shah is an associate professor in the information school and an adjunct professor in computer science and engineering department, as well as the human-centered design and engineering department. Daniel is an undergraduate student studying computer science. So we're all from the University of Washington in Seattle. First, let me introduce the background of our study. Our work relies in the realm of studying search engine biases, and some prior work have dedicated to detect, measuring, and also mitigating the search engine biases. But those work aim to address the issues from the source of the biases, which are the search engines themselves. But we took the user's perspective to study the search engine biases. Our work is also motivated by one of our previous project, Google or Not. In that project, we paired the real Google search pages with synthesized versions, which are less biased. That means having more diversities. And we asked the survey participants, which one do they prefer? And the project reviewed that there's no significant difference between the ratio of selecting the two pages. But what remained unknown is, why did the participants select the ones they prefer? Like, what are the reasonings underneath their preferences? So motivated by that, we revisited the project and improved our study design, catering to two goals. The first is we want to evaluate the user's perceptions of the search engine biases, thus hoping to review the reasonings of their choices or preferences. The second is we want to investigate the effects on user satisfaction when the search engine biases are regulated. In terms of the related work, there are several areas that we considered. First, as I mentioned, some prior work have attempted to disclose and mitigate the search engine biases. The biases are not limited in the search engines, in wider context of automated systems, such as the recommender systems. There's one work I want to specifically mention by Collins. They identified the position bias in the recommender systems, which is the tendency of users to interact with the top ranked results over the lower ranked results. And we incorporated that in our study design. Additionally, to reduce the bias in the search engine, in other words, is to provide a fairer search results. So our work is also related with the fair ranking studies, the goal of which is to generate the ranking list with non-discriminatory and fair exposure of different defined groups. In addition to those two areas, we also look at the machine learning community, where some work have analyzed the human perception of fairness and biases in the algorithms using some survey studies. But however, as far as we know, in the fair ranking and the search engine domain, few works have analyzed the user's consciousness towards the biases and also their behaviors really associated. So our work aims to do that, inspired by the fairness and bias perception work in the machine learning community. Next, I'll talk about the experimental design. To collect the user's data, as I mentioned, we improved the survey design from the previous project and deployed it in mTurk. The survey starts with a consent form, followed by some demographic questions that are about the age groups, the education level, and the gender. And then we provided a demo with detailed instructions of how to complete a survey. After that, there are 20 rounds of main questions. Each one is followed with a reflection question. The main question is similar to the previous project. We paired a real Bing search page with a synthesized version, and the synthesized version has more diversities in the results, equivalently less biased. And I'll talk more about the algorithm that we use to generate the synthesized versions. Both the real page and the synthesized page display the top 10 results. And then the reflection question asks, why do you prefer the page you chose? There are 5 choices that the user can choose. The last one is an open-ended question that they can type the text. And after we collected the user's data, some descriptive statistical analysis were conducted to get some insights and also to help us answer the questions. The synthesized pages, as I talked about, are less biased because they have more diversities or varieties in the values or in the topics in the search results. The algorithm that we used is called epsilon 0.3 greedy algorithm with statistical parity as the fairness controller. We chose this algorithm not just to be consistent with the previous project, but primarily based on the study by Gao and Xia in 2020. So what they did is they tested several fair ranking algorithms to probe the relationships among relevance, fairness, novelty. And they found out that the epsilon greedy algorithm provided fairer search results at no cost in the relevance. So that's why we decided to proceed with the epsilon greedy algorithm. And the statistical parity functions as the fairness controller, aiming to provide equal or close presences of different groups in the search result. And here's how the algorithm works. First, given a certain search query, we cluster the documents or the results into k number of groups. And the documents within each group share similar values or views. Then we will replace 3 items from the top 10 list with 3 lower ranked items based on the frequencies of different groups in the top 10 list. Let's say if the top 10 has 8 items from group A and 2 items from group B, then we will replace 3 out of 8 items from group A in the top 10 list with 3 lower ranked documents from group B, such that the presences of the 2 groups in the top 10 list are close to each other. That's how we define it as fair or less biased. In addition, as I mentioned in the related work, the position bias might also impact the user's preferences or their choice of which page they prefer. So the replacement could happen in either the top 5 or bottom 5 in the top 10 list, as shown in the figure on the right. That means out of the 20 rounds of main questions, half has the top 5 replacement and half has the bottom 5 replacement. Before we dive into the results, I want to re-emphasize the questions that we want to answer from this study and also the hypothesis that we will be testing. The 2 questions that we want to answer are first, why do the participants choose the pages that they prefer, considering different level of biases in the 2 pages? Second question is, does regulating the search engine biases hinder users' satisfaction? And there are 3 I would call testable hypotheses. The first is that, okay, people do not care or notice the differences between the 2 pages. The second hypothesis is location where the differences present matters. So when the differences are at the bottom of the search list, people do not care. That is also taken from the position bias. The third hypothesis is people prefer the results with high relevance, equivalently more biased, as opposed to high diversity, equivalently less biased. The user's preferences of the pages and also their answers to the reflection question can help us test those hypotheses, which further help us answer the questions. Then let's talk about the results. We got around 2,100 responses, which is a good sample size. First is the selection ratios analysis. Overall, we saw that 53% of the responses prefer the real pages, while 47% prefer the synthesized versions. We conducted the chi-square goodness of fit test, and the result turns to be significant. That means the difference between the 2 ratios is significant. But in terms of the bottom 5 replacement group, there is no difference at all between the ratio of selecting 2 groups. Things are different for the top 5 replacement group. We see similar result as the overall result. where significantly more responses prefer the real pages over the synthesized versions. Additionally, we conducted a chi-square test of independence on the user's preferences and also the replacement group. The result turned to be significant, indicating that the location where the differences present is indeed associated with the user's preferences, and that confirms the position bias. The second is the reasoning analysis. So we have 4 default reasons from the reflection question. Each one corresponds to the choices from the reflection choices. And we have 3 selection groups. The first is the original group, which contains all the responses that selected the real pages. The top 5 group contains all the responses that selected the synthesized versions with the top 5 replacement. And that's the same for the bottom 5, where it contains all the responses that selected the synthesized versions with bottom 5 replacement. We run the chi-square goodness of fit test within each group. And as you can see, the p-values are extremely small. That means the results are significantly, the observed frequencies of the reasoning are extremely different from, are significantly different from their expected values. And also, given the fact that the diff same topic reason, its frequency dominates all other reasons, it is reasonable to conjecture that the frequency of the diff same topic is significantly higher than its expected value. So as for conclusions, let's go back to the 2 questions that we want to answer from this study. The first is, why do the participants choose the pages they prefer? As we show the position bias, and also we confirm that the location where the diversity is introduced is associated with the user's preferences. And also from the reasoning analysis, we saw that the majority of the participants prefer the real pages because those pages provide the search results that are homogeneous and relevant with the search queries. And also the results are more consistent with each other. That's why they prefer the real pages. And the second question is, does regulating the search engine biases hinder user satisfaction? From the selection ratio analysis, we saw that significantly more responses prefer the real pages over the synthesized versions. So that means adding more diversities into the search results does reduce the biases, but also potentially damages the relevance and consistency of the results. So it is reasonable to see that the user satisfaction are impaired to some degree. So that's my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.